How to conquer entrepreneurial anxiety with strategies that work. So let's face it, guys, entrepreneurship, it is a very rewarding thing to do, but also it can be a scary and a tough thing to do, especially if you don't know what you're doing, and especially if you're very new at this. You know, entrepreneurship, it is literally like a muscle that you're building, but it's a muscle that's built in your mind. I love what Tony Robbins says about entrepreneurship, but really skill sets, anything that you want to be good at. He typically says that it's 80% psychology and 20% skill. So when it comes to the business that you're trying to build at this moment, have faith that it's not all about the X's and O's or the IQ that you have, because sometimes we feel as though those things are almost like given, and it's not something that you can actually like build or develop, but really it's the psychology that's really the most important piece. It's going to be the psychology that helps you to actually develop the muscles and the persistence to learn the skill. But something that's really, really important is that once you learn the skill, your ability to implement that skill, to execute it on its biggest level. Because I could be in the gym for a full year practicing my free throw shooting, but if I get into the games and I choke, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really help that I spent a year shooting free throws if I can't execute when the lights are on. And that's where the psychology piece is so important. And that's what I'm talking about in this podcast episode. Because here's the thing, there's a good chance that you're very talented in what you do. There's a good chance that you probably have a great idea. And what I've learned in this entrepreneurial journey is that a lot of people have good ideas, but there's only a fraction of people that's willing to bring that idea to life. Gaining a lot of confidence in the idea that many people will shoot themselves in their foot. Many people will stop themselves in their own tracks and not go all the way with their ideas. And therefore, you that's listening right now, you that's watching this video right now, trust me when I say, you don't have to be great in order to win at this game of entrepreneurship. You just have to be able to master the psychology piece of it. And that's what we're going to talk about in this podcast episode. So what I want you to do is, before I go to the next point, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now so that you can continue getting information like this that's going to help you with the psychology piece and not necessarily all the what ifs and all the skill sets that you need to learn. Like, hey, those things will come, but if you don't master the psychology piece, trust me when I say, you will not make it far in this entrepreneurship game. So again, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and let's go ahead and get to the first point, and make sure you stay for the last point, because the last point is a killer. So the main point that I want to make, the first main point that I want to make when it comes to how to conquer entrepreneurship anxiety, it's all about finding stories of successful entrepreneurs who have struggled initially in their goals, right? In their paths, in their journeys. The reason why is because it's very easy for us to see the people that have won, that has become successful, that's made millions of dollars. It's very easy to find those stories and be attracted to it, be drawn to it. But a lot of people, what they tend to do is they glaze over the fact that they struggled up until that point where they became successful. That's why you hear the phrase, it seems like you became successful overnight, right? Or an overnight success. Those things do not exist. And what's probably more accurate or closer to the truth is the fact that they were successful over thousands of nights, right? It wasn't just one night, but it was thousands of nights that they became successful. Now, when I sat at a conference one year, I remember listening to all the entrepreneurs that are making 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, and even 9 figures. So yes, over $100 million. I remember sitting and I was listening to their stories, and there was something that stuck out to me, something that I always wanted to sit and really listen to. Because here's the thing, me and you, we've already heard all the success stories, right? Like, we know that there's, hundreds of thousands of people out there that are making 6 figures, 7 figures. Like, every time you get on social media, you see someone driving a Lamborghini or living in a big house or showing screenshots of all the money that they made. But what people typically don't do is they typically don't share the story that got them there. What we tend to miss is that before they became that person, there was a phase in their life where they struggled. And that part is where I want you to actually focus in on. So for me, as you can see behind me, if you're listening or if you're watching this on YouTube, you see I got my man Kobe Bryant right behind me. And I love Kobe Bryant's story. So Kobe, in high school, he was actually an All-American. So he was great. He was really good. But when he got into the NBA, he would look to his left, look to his right, and he would see guys like Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Steve Nash. The people that he got drafted with, these people were either starting on their teams or they were just killing the league, right? Getting a lot of playing time. But here was Kobe Bryant sitting on the bench. Some nights he didn't even get a chance to play. He didn't get any playing time. And he's sitting there and he's looking at himself like, man, I should have stayed in college if I knew this was going to happen, or I should have went to college if I'd known that this was going to happen. So Kobe, his career didn't start off blazing. he actually had to work his way up. And there was actually one game, he was in the playoffs, and he's playing against the Utah Jazz. And what's funny about that game was that in the fourth quarter, Kobe was given the ball, I want to say 3 times, and he shot it. And 3 straight times, he airballed. And this was a crucial game. This was a game to be able to go to the finals. And it was tough for Kobe because he's coming out of high school as an All-American, and he's given this opportunity and he's blowing it, right? Even when they got into the overtime, because that game was very, very close. Kobe got another chance to shoot a 3 to possibly win the game, and he airballed that shot as well. So Kobe shot and missed 4 shots, 4 air balls in a row. You can Google that right now on YouTube and you can find it. But how often do we talk about that story? And there may be a chance that you didn't even know that story existed. The reason why I'm asking you guys to actually find the stories of successful people who struggle is because I want to normalize where you're currently at in your business. Because we tend to believe that this place that we're in right now when we're struggling, not making a lot of money, right? Not having the sales that we believe that we should be having, or not getting the views that we want. We tend to believe that this is not for us. We tend to believe that, man, we're doing something wrong, and that is not the case. Trust me when I say every successful person that you look up to, they've been in this situation. It's just that you haven't taken the time to actually study the failures, right? The failures of some of these people. Like, we know all about the successes. I know about Kobe's 5 championship rings, but do I know about those games where he struggled, where he lost? Games where maybe he didn't have the most proficient night shooting. Those are the stories that I personally love to study, because it allows me and it will allow you to have this moment in your career, in your business, where you're not doing the best, where maybe you're actually failing. And that is okay, because when you normalize that, guess what it allows you to do? It allows you to do real work. So that's what I want you to focus on right now. So go ahead, study some of the people that you look up to and look at their failures before you look at their successes. And that will help normalize where you're currently at. All right, main point number 2. So the second way to help you to conquer your anxiety as an entrepreneur is to actually become an expert at the small things. That's right, the small things, guys. And I give you guys 2 ways of how I do that. So one of those ways, unfortunately, it comes with this podcast that I'm doing right here. I always tell people, man, at heart, I'm an introvert, meaning I don't like getting in front of cameras. I don't like being in front of large crowds, right? I just love being by myself, being in my shell. But this is something that I love to do. I love helping people with their mental health. I love talking about entrepreneurship. So when it comes to those areas, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna perform, I'm gonna show up. But sometimes starting up to that point or getting up to that point, it could be a little bit of a struggle. Even with this podcast journey, there are times where, man, it was tough for me to do a 5-minute podcast or a 10-minute podcast. And lately, man, it's been tough, but I've actually been struggling with keeping my podcast under 20 minutes, right? So think about that. At one point in time, it was a struggle just to get to 5 minutes. Now it's a struggle to keep it under 20 minutes, meaning I'm just going overtime because I love what I'm talking about, and I feel so much more comfortable looking into this camera, speaking into this microphone, and giving you guys tips. But how did I get there? Well, I got there because I mastered the small things. I literally had to tell myself sometimes, like, hey, let me just be the best. I mean, the absolute best in the world at turning this computer on. Sounds crazy, but it's a small thing that gets you ready to do the bigger things. I told myself, let me be the best at setting up this mic. Let me be the best at typing out this outline. Let me be the best at looking at this camera and just announcing the intro to this podcast. These are the small things that we need to execute on before we get to the big thing. And even when you get to the big thing, trust me when I say you can chop that down, and you can also master those small pieces. But when you don't take that time to look at things for what it is, the little small components, it's gonna seem overwhelming. It's gonna seem like this great big task, and guess what you're gonna do? You're gonna fall back. You're gonna procrastinate. You're not gonna execute on it. So what I'm telling you right now is that if you're feeling anxious about some part of your business, take a moment to break it down. If it's something like sales, and I did this myself, if it's something like sales, for example, there's a good chance you have a script, and your script may have maybe 10 to 15 different pieces or parts to it. I would tell you to master each single piece of that script. Understand why you're saying what it is that you're saying. And for a lot of people, the part where they're struggling the most with is the closes, it's the objections, it's the announcing of the price. At that part, I need you to stop and really focus on what are the pieces that I need to be saying, what are the things that I'm missing, what are the skills, the techniques that I've been taught that I'm not executing that I need to execute. Break it down just like that, and then practice it, guys, practice it. I can't say that enough. That's probably like the most ugliest advice that I can give. It's being consistent, it's practicing. It's not sexy, it's not a hack, it's just something that you gotta do. That's why what you do has to be something that's very meaningful for you. because when it's meaningful, it doesn't feel hard to do. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like a passion. And that's how I feel with this podcast. So again, step number 2 is to make sure that you become an expert in the small things. All right, number 3, you guys are gonna love this one, and I love it personally. And if you've been listening to this podcast, if you're a loyal listener, you know there's a few books that I constantly quote, and this is no different. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey is a great book. I did it with a book club of mine. And in that book, habit number 1, he talks about being proactive. And he talks about the difference between people that are proactive and reactive. And one principle that he really touched on, that he built a lot on, was the principle of responsibility. Now, the way he explained it, I loved it. He said responsibility is just simply your ability to respond, right? Your ability to respond to hardship, your ability to respond to no's, your ability to respond to failures. That is something that determines success, and that is something that people that are proactive have a very high level of, right? Very high level of being able to respond to things that are, let's say, not comfortable, right? So with this third one, right, this third hack, this third secret, the key to helping you to overcome your entrepreneur anxiety is to take responsibility. I want you to take responsibility for everything that happens in your business. And here's the thing, guys, it's not just the bad stuff, but it's the good stuff as well. You know, I can't tell you how many people I've seen that do not celebrate themselves when they succeed or accomplish a goal. You know, typically they'll just shrug it off, or it's even worse, they'll quickly find another goal and not take time to focus and celebrate the current achievement that it just had. And what that communicates to the mind is that you haven't made progress, or even worse, that you're not worthy of being celebrated. So what I want you guys to do is take responsibility for the good, but also take responsibility for the bad. You know, the thing about entrepreneurship that separates itself from 9 to 5 is that entrepreneurship, everything falls on you. If you do not make money, guess what? There's nobody you can call on. It starts with you and it ends with you. You know, when I worked as a high school counselor, I hate to admit it, but you know, there are some days where, man, I just didn't have it. And what I mean by that is, you know, there's some days I probably gave 50%. And I'll say this, I probably had 70% to give, but I only gave 50%. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to save that last 20% for this dream of mine, which I'm living now as a private practice therapist. So what I'm trying to say is that when everything falls on you, you are forced to take responsibility. People that tend to blame others, or I'll even say this, people that tend to blame outside circumstances. So it could be blaming COVID, blaming your race, blaming your gender, right? Blaming your religion, blaming so many different things. It puts you in a place of feeling like you have no control in this world. And when you feel like you don't have any control, guess what you're gonna feel? You're gonna feel anxious. So what I want you to do is to make a list of all the things that you can control when it comes to this current problem that you're facing. Every entrepreneur has a problem that they're currently facing. Right now, there's a problem you're facing, and there's a problem I'm facing. Right now, one thing that I'm focused on is getting more traffic. And the best way for me to take responsibility of that is taking a course, or what I'm personally doing is hiring someone to help me with getting more traffic, whether it's to videos and podcasts like this, or it's to my funnels. But that falls on me. I can't blame Mark Zuckerberg or Google for not sending the right traffic. Like, I gotta figure that piece out. And you do too. So the problem that you're currently having in your business, just pick one. And I dare you. I know, you know what? I double dog dare you, right? So that's really, really big. I double dog dare you to write down 5 ways that you can take responsibility for this problem that you're having, and then implement it. Don't be afraid, guys. And this is something I talked about in another podcast of how to manifest your dreams. And one of the ways you do that is by implementing and studying your failures, right? So when you fail, right, and I advise you to fail quickly. When you fail, study that failure and then implement the changes as quickly as possible. Don't just sit on that information, okay? So again, with this third step, make sure that you take responsibility for everything within your business. All right, we're on point number 4, and because you made it this far to this podcast, to me, it says that you really, really enjoy it. And because you enjoy it, why miss another episode? So therefore, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can keep getting content like this. So with that being said, point number 4, right? The 4th way to help you to overcome your anxiety as an entrepreneur is to simply be a student and test. Now, I used to be afraid of this, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. So in entrepreneurship, if you're building funnels, website pages, like anything really, you know it's important to split test. Now, what is split test? Split test is kind of like an experiment, one that you will see, let's say in high school or middle school, where you have a controlled environment or whatever you want to call it, substance. And what you want to do is you want to see what happens when you add a new substance or you add something new to it. Does it change? And does it change for the better or for the worse? And typically you have two, right? So you have the control and then you have the experiment, okay? So what you want to do is you want to add something new to the experiment substance or control thing to see if the changes are good or bad. All right, so let me put this in entrepreneurship language. So with split testing on a funnel, right? What you're gonna do is you're gonna have 2 landing pages. Everything is gonna be the same on those landing pages except one thing. You're gonna change the headline. And the reason why is because the headline on the web page, on the funnel, is the most important thing that speaks out to the person that's landing on that page. So what you may write on that page, for example, is 7 ways to building confidence, all right? So that's one, right? And let's say that's the control. What you're gonna do on the experiment is you're gonna write 7 mistakes you're making to building your confidence, right? That's gonna be the experiment. And what you wanna do is you wanna send 100 people to those pages, right? So 100 here, 100 there. And what you wanna see is how well each page converts, right? How many people fill out their information for the lead magnet or purchase the item that you have on that page. When you do that, idea of which page works. When you find out that, let's say the one that says 7 mistakes you're making when building your confidence, let's say that's converting at 37%. What you want to do is you want to shut down the other page, which is maybe converting at 20%. You want to shut that one down and create a new one and see if the new one can beat the page that's converting at 37%. Now, let me step out of the weeds because I'm kind of getting deep into it as you can tell. What I'm trying to say is that with everything that you do in entrepreneurship, you need to be a student. You need to study your failures. You know, something that people tend to struggle with is actually failing and seeing it as an opportunity. You know, failure and fear, these are 2 things that really your perception determines how well you handle this. And I'm gonna do a podcast on this later, so I'm giving you insight. But I'm gonna do a podcast on fear and how to overcome it. And one of the things that's so important is that the way our mind sees this thing really determines if we're afraid of it or not. Because let's face it, sharks, which is a big fear of mine, they're not per se fearful, right, or dangerous, if you will. And I mean, when I say that, I mean you have shark divers, right? If sharks were fearful, just fear across the board, everyone were afraid of them, there's a good chance you wouldn't have shark divers, right? Fire is something that I think most people are probably afraid of, especially if it's uncontrolled. But yet you have firefighters, right? So a firefighter could look at a building that's on fire and charge towards it. You and myself, people who are not firefighters, can look at that building and go, whoa, I need to get out of there. So again, it's not the thing, right? But it's more so how our mind is perceiving the thing. So it could be rejections, it could be fires, it could be sharks, it could be snakes, it could be heights. Whatever it is, it's the way our mind sees it. And this is why, again, being a student and being willing to test is just so important, because the greatest entrepreneurs, they are also the greatest failures on this earth. And the reason why is because they're students of the game and they learn how to test and study those test results to get better results the 2nd, 3rd, or the 100th time around. So don't be afraid of being a student and test your results. Main point number 5, man, I'm so glad that you made it this far, guys. So main point number 5 of how to conquer your entrepreneurship anxiety is by exposing yourself to anxiety. It's wait, what? Yes. The more you expose yourself to things that you're afraid of, the more you communicate to your mind that this feeling isn't something I have to obey. It's not something I have to lay down and give my life to. Because as it sits right now, a lot of people, maybe yourself included, you're afraid of being afraid. You're anxious of being anxious. And actually, that's one of the things that causes panic attacks. So if you're someone that struggles with panic attacks, it's not the anxiety that gets you, but it's the fear of having that anxiety attacks that creates the anxiety attack, right? It sounds crazy, but that's what happens. So the more you expose yourself to anxiety, the more you build up this almost this muscle within you to be able to do tough things and be able to do hard things. And right now I have my newsletter list, right? So I have a list of people that subscribe to my newsletter, and I'm putting them through a sequence, and I'm going over the 4 C's, okay? The 4 C's of confidence. And one of the last C's that I'm gonna tell them is challenges, okay? So one of the 4 C's of challenge, or one of the 4 C's of confidence is challenges. What I mean by that is the more that you challenge yourself, you're able to see what you're truly made of. The more you start to build that confidence within yourself, that again, you can do tough things, right? So what I want you to do is to find something in your business that frightens you, and I want you to take a small step towards it. And again, I give you guys so many different examples throughout my podcast and other shows, but take small steps towards this thing that you're afraid of and just study what happens. Notice how you're able to still do the thing afraid and not dissolve in a puddle of water or whatever, like the Wizard of Oz, like the witch from the Wizard of Oz. Like, you're gonna be fine. Like, trust me. You know, there's nothing like failing, and then seeing that you get better, and then honestly see that you become great, right? It's kind of like I said, it's like a muscle, but it's almost like a new story that you're creating for yourself. It's like the story of almost like the little engine that could. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's like the little engine, which is like a little train. You kept saying, I think I can, right? And I want you to have that same idea or concept about yourself. You know, it's the concept that I can fail, get a little bit better, right? Maybe fail again, and then become great, right? Then have this success that kind of seems like it came overnight. And that's what you're gonna do to help you to overcome this anxiety. So real quick, I'm gonna go over the 5 ways to conquer your anxiety as an entrepreneur. And again, these are strategies that I know for a fact work because they work for me and they've worked with so many of my clients. So the first way that I went over is to find successful entrepreneurs who have struggled initially. And I want you guys to study those struggles. Don't just study their successes, but study those struggles as well. The second one, become an expert at the small things. And there's a quote that says, the way you do one thing is how you do everything. So become an expert at the small things, guys. The third way, take responsibility. And it's responsibility for everything, not just the bad, but even the good. The fourth way, be a student and test. Do not be afraid of failure. It is probably the most data-rich event that can happen to you and your business. And then number 5, expose yourself to anxiety just again and again and again, just to reframe what you fear or what you see fear as. If you follow these 5 steps, trust me when I say, you will overcome that anxiety and transform your business for the better. This is Coach Wells. I'm a licensed therapist, and thank you for checking out this podcast.